Hello, everyone. I'm Todd Pruzan, Senior Editor for Research and Special Projects at Harvard Business Review. Thanks for being with us today. Many organizations today are making it one of their top priorities to start working with AI agents. This rapidly emerging technology could transform customer service and entire sectors like healthcare by delivering more efficient, more personalized customer experience. And AI agents' impact on workplace collaboration could also be huge by boosting human innovation, productivity, and accessibility. In fact, 82% of organizations in one recent study said they're planning to adopt AI agents within the next 3 years. We're here today with Jamil Valiani, who is head of product AI at Atlassian, to talk about AI agents and the change they could bring. Thanks for being with us, Jamil.
Thanks for having me, Todd. It's wonderful to be here.
Jamil, let's start with the basics. How do you define AI agents?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think most people are familiar with chatbots rather, that can answer questions about general world knowledge, right? And then we've been delighted by seeing what they can do. But when it comes to agents, they really are uniquely trained to accomplish specific tasks. So think about them as like a sous chef or that intern that works with you alongside you. For example, you can train an agent to be really good at reviewing an expense report for policy breaks, or to go in help you evaluate a plan, for example. There's always a set of knowledge that our organizations have that are very specific to their company, their practices. And we try to make sure that agents, we can configure agents to actually know that, to be able to capture that knowledge. And then, then be able to go and actually serve the user by being that extra pair of hands to actually answer questions and act specifically on that. And we find that that's a big gap between what agents can do and what chatbots can do. A chatbot cannot do those sorts of things. We also find that agents, when they're trained to do specific things, are actually able to accomplish a lot more. So they can actually, you can actually trust them to say, hey, you're really specifically trained on a task. Let me go and actually do that task over and over and over again, and you'll become really, really good at it. And that frees up everyone else to go focus on the creative and reasoning things that are just not automatable.
That does sound really helpful. Jamil, what interests you most about AI agents' potential to transform the workplace?
Yeah, I think that, we just announced Rovo, which is our AI product built for the AI era, and building agents is a big part of that product. And so we've had this in beta now for a few months. And what we've seen is that nearly 75% of our beta users just in the last few months have already said these agents are helping them get work done faster. Now, everyone basically is able to give themselves a virtual teammate or 10 virtual teammates to just take the load off. Like I said, reviewing documents, making sure that things conform to certain standards. These are things that are so tedious but important to running the business. And now they're actually starting to, take that load off, which is really making a big difference for the lives and the everyday work productivity of our customers. So we've really seen this evidence now coming to light that AI is going to change the fabric of teamwork. Whether you're a software team building that next amazing product, the marketing team creating that campaign, or a service agent supporting customers, we expect that everyone will be partnering with AI.
Okay, so how should organizations be designing AI agents to make sure that the users feel like they're working with other humans as their teammates?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think key to this is going to be to make sure agents feel like they are teammates. So that means they have to be woven into your existing workflow as if they're a colleague. So it should be as intuitive as Googling or Slacking a coworker or tagging a teammate in a comment. And this is a big difference since the first generation of agents that people may remember. In that last generation, they were quite rigid. They had very limited knowledge and ability to act. And it almost felt like you were trying to coax them to do the right thing. So we've been working very hard to make sure that these new generation of agents behave more like a teammate. So you can mention them in a conversation, add them to a document as a collaborator like you would a normal team member. We're also making sure that they can actually, once you assign them a task, they can actually run in the background without interrupting you or being sort of this weight that you have to kind of keep managing. Where, as I mentioned before, that, allowing you to actually instruct the agent on company-specific knowledge or practices, and then giving them that specialized skill set. People understand this concept that, some person or something here is an expert at this task. So the more we can go and convey that and make sure that they see that to be true, the more we think that end users will actually trust and begin to rely on these agents. And then we can do all that, but we also want to make sure that humans still feel like they are in control. So, for example, before making changes, agents will ask for approval. They might seek input on how to plan and execute a complicated task, just like you would imagine like a junior colleague, for example. So these are the things that we really want people to be thinking about as they design their own agents and how they'll actually kind of make themselves comfortable and sort of friendly and embraced by people at companies.
Yeah, just give them kind of human characteristics, a human feeling. It sounds like.
Yeah, exactly. You do want to feel like when you're working with an agent that it's like a colleague that maybe just joined the company or maybe has a few weeks of experience. Someone you're investing in training in, but is there to meet your needs and is learning from you. And I think that if we can create that sense of like partnership, like, hey, I'm going to give you some knowledge, that I can trust you to go out and do the things I tell you to go do. We think that the smoother we can make that setup, the more successful this will be.
That's great. Jamil, why did you decide against an all-knowing AI agent? Did you feel there's more value in developing specialized AI agents?
Yeah, it's really disconcerting for a user, and it's not really natural at all to work with something that is the single all-knowing thing. It's just not something that people really understand. It's not something that they trust very easily. And we also found that it doesn't also work best that way. We found that the more we're able to train agents with specific knowledge on specific tasks, with specific skill sets and actions, the better and better it just gets. And so I think this combination of saying, hey, A, people just don't think about it that way, and B, we can actually do a better job if we create a set of individual team members that do specific tasks. They'll actually all do it much, much better individually. We'll just create the right productive outcomes that we're looking for, and also increase that adoption and that willingness to embrace them. We expect that every discipline, every team at a company will create agents this way. So for example, our communications team has created an agent called the Comms Crafter, and they've basically given it the knowledge of like, here are specific practices related to communications, and here are the actions that we recommend you go take whenever you have a piece of comms review, and they can just go and tell people that they work with, hey, like before you send something to us, just invoke the Comms Crafter agent, pretend like you're talking to us, and it'll do a first pass for you, right? And that's a very natural thing for a customer to understand. And then that team can go and monitor the knowledge that agent has, what its quality is, and they can decide to retrain it or give it more capabilities depending on what they experience. We have another distinguished PM at Atlassian who is really good at reviewing decision documents. So people will capture complicated decisions, the pros and the cons and the options. And there's often best practices because we are a distributed team on how to write all that out and make sure it's well communicated. And oftentimes people will just ping them saying, hey, can you review this decision document? And of course he's happy to, but it takes a lot of time. And most of the feedback is pretty much the same. So what he's done is created a decision reviewer agent and has just uploaded all of the best practices that he usually coaches teams on, given it a sort of scoring criteria to work with teams on. So, hey, evaluate this decision based on these 10 dimensions, and give it a green, yellow, red on each of those dimensions based on these parameters being met. And now he's able to really multiply that mentorship he's able to provide because the agent is able to go in, look at something based on the criteria he set, give feedback, and then when the team does come to him maybe later on, he might be reviewing it for much more substantial matters instead of some of the things that are more repetitive in nature.
That is pretty amazing. Jamil, so one key concern about AI is making sure that the humans are the ones who are staying in control. How does an organization strike that balance between using the capabilities of AI agents and keeping the oversight and the decision-making with the humans?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And I know that this sort of change can always be disconcerting sometimes, and people have all sorts of natural fears of that change. I understand that. So the first thing we're doing is making sure that humans are at the center of every interaction pattern we create with an agent. We also are giving substantial amount of control to the end user and to the administrators at companies. So for example, administrators can enable or disable specific agents. A lot of times agents can suggest things, but we'll make sure humans can approve them. Agents also communicate progress. Like they share their plans, they ask for feedback. You can guide them, cancel whatever they're about to do if you don't think it's headed the right direction. So that way, humans will feel like ultimately they're compliments to us, right? Like they're not really trying to go and take over or muscle their way in. They're just trying to go in and say, hey, look, you asked me to do this. I'm going to share with you what you need to know just to make sure I'm doing it right. And then I'm going to free up your time to think creatively, but I'll keep you posted on how I'm doing, right? Like that's, if you bring anyone else new into your team, that might be the operational model that you have with them. We're going to try to mimic that same thing here. And ultimately, if we do this right, people will have more time to collaborate with each other while the agents are taking care of the mundane, but in a very supervised way.
Definitely good to have more time for humans to be collaborating on the things that really matter. Jamil, how will AI improve work and productivity at organizations, both at the individual and at the team levels?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I'd say that we're already seeing a lot of transformation here. We're now asking really not if, but how best to harness this potential. Already nearly every Atlassian has used Rovo, for example, just to get work done. And our virtual agents are assisting with more than half of our daily employee requests now, which has freed up like the support team's time by like 100 days, right? It's actually literally that order of magnitude, and it's only early days. So as we kind of look at like other things that we're seeing that very much can be assisted, at the team and organization level, I think we find a few examples here. So for example, this blank page problem, the idea that a team or a person might be staring at a blank page, just knowing that they have to accomplish some big task, but trying to figure out how to structure it, how to approach it. And the AI is serving as a buddy, right? To say, hey, let me go and take this big concept and help you break it down into a few pieces so you can go and tackle it. This idea of structuring actually continues. And we think about, for example, you might have a brainstorming meeting with, a dozen participants. And a lot of times, that somebody has to draw this short straw, being the one who collects all the sticky notes and says, okay, let me go and figure out how to group these into themes and try to then summarize that and create work items and a tracking tool around that. And that's another thing that an AI can go do. It can actually help you organize information. We're seeing a lot of issues also that are solved with dealing with mass quantities of information. So for example, we see heavy usage of tools that summarize content through AI. So you might have like a long page you have to go read. And a lot of times that's just daunting, or maybe you worked on a page or an issue like weeks ago and it was worked on since. And the big question is, well, what changed here? We're seeing a lot of our team members use AI to solve those kinds of problems. Repetitive tasks, right? Those are things that you just have to do over and over and over again, and they're not really adding to the creative process and the strategic process. And people are now creating more and more advanced agents to go do those sorts of things. I've also seen some great experience in onboarding. I just had a colleague the other day who joined the company from, I used to work with him a while ago, and his employee orientation was scheduled for the following week. But he told me 2 days later, he's like, hey, I've been using Rovo to just ask all the onboarding questions. And I don't think I need to go on onboarding anymore because I'm just asking questions and it's answering them and putting me to all the right documentation. So I feel like I'm up to speed already. So those are just a few examples of just how we're seeing productivity already improve. And I think we'll just see so many more in the days and months ahead.
That's great. I mean, can you talk about any of these other examples of the way organizations are using AI agents and the what effects they're having on the business?
Yeah. So we've had a few customers, as I mentioned, using our latest product in beta, which is a heavy agents building capability. So one of our customers, Procore, they actually had their technical program management team start to use agents, and one of their core functions is building roadmaps. And they've said that a lot of the agent work that they've been doing has helped cut their roadmap building time by up to 3/4. There's also a bank in the Middle East, TBC Bank, and they've been spending time reducing the time they spent by about 40%, I believe, on just regular everyday tasks, just through using agents. So we were seeing our customers actually using them in stunning ways, and even internally, we're continuing to work on state-of-the-art agents, things that are really leading edge. So, for example, a lot of software engineers are spending a good chunk of their day is not on creating new features, but on just fixing bugs and responding to requests to update configuration or these other things that take time. and they require context. It takes like an hour for somebody to go and understand what the code, what that code did, who wrote it last, what are the right technical requirements to go in, edit the code. And instead now for those types of tasks, we're building an agent that actually is, because we have access to the documentation to where the code repository is, it actually is able to go and look at all that, quickly understand the context, and suggest the change right in line. So they don't have to actually go and open the developer environment and look at, and try to ramp up themselves. The agent will just suggest the code change, and it will just tell it what it learned and why it's suggesting what it's suggesting. And we think that that's just saving so much time already internally. And with one of our customer stats, that they're actually, again, their engineers are now spending more time actually building net new things, and not trying to fix these smaller bugs or things that might be more tedious but important to do.
That does sound like a tremendous amount of time saved and energy expended in the right ways. Jamil, what are the trends that you're seeing with AI adoption across industries? I mean, what is driving adoption, and what is standing in the way of adoption?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we're still very much in the early days. At this point, based on our latest analysis, we found that only half of knowledge workers are actually using AI on a weekly basis at this point. So there's still a long way to go. We also know there's just a lot now. Like every company is innovating here, and it can be really difficult for people to figure out, okay, which tools do I start with? Which ones are good? Which ones are not so good? And so it becomes a challenge to incorporate these tools into workflows and build patterns around them. So it's characterized often as like a massive transformation, but we don't think it's helpful to characterize it that way internally. It's really helpful for folks to look at it in a piecemeal way. So we found, for example, just having teams play for a while, say, hey, look, let's look at a few tasks that we just spend a lot of hours on per week, and then let's play with some of the tools that we have access to now and form ideas together on how that we might use those tools to improve time. So it becomes like a collaborative effort and people are discovering what might work for them. Because they really, we find that helps, kind of erase some of the discomfort and make it more of a joint process, and it's something that can be embraced. We also find that setting the right expectations is important. I think there's some folks who just say, oh, AI will do everything. And then they just, ask, a question or assign a complicated task. And they see that, actually it didn't do too well, and they just give up on it. So again, it creates this importance of saying, hey, let's start with small bite-sized things. I'll experiment with some tools for a while. Maybe set a goal as a small team to save a few minutes a week, and then work their way up from there. That I think is what we see is most successful. The other thing that we often find is that there are certain teams that are culturally, beachhead teams, are people who just like to try things first and be at the leading edge. And so as we find, those teams and see that they're almost like self-initiating, we just try to give them more visibility, more light, and call attention to the successes they're having to encourage others.
That's great. Jamil, what do you think organizations can be doing to increase AI adoption within their teams?
Yeah, I think it's sort of a culture shift, right? I think that if for folks who have not worked with AI tools before, there's a bit of a different way of thinking. I think that when people typically work with tools, SaaS tools, computers, they're used to a pretty linear way of operating. Like I do this, I press this key, and this thing happens, right? And AI is a bit different. It has a little bit of a predictability element to it, and then that might take some time for folks to adjust to. So really encouraging people to think of this AI as not as like a computer anymore, but as like a junior teammate. That really helps kind of get the right mindset going. And then really saying, hey, look, because it's a junior teammate that you're working with, you still got to check its work, and you got to give it instructions in a more piecemeal fashion. It's not just going to go and do it magically for you. And then create this relationship saying, hey, the more you work with it, the more it's going to do for you. So like I said, I think starting small, right? Giving folks that expectation setting is super important. And then, having a cycle as a team where you look at how it's working and say, hey, what could be better? Hey, these two features, these two capabilities work really well. We have higher error rates on this capability. What can we go do together to give it more data to learn from? That kind of a practice or ritual is helpful. And to think about it, it's almost like, giving, feedback to your intern or to your junior employee, and giving them the right training. And then of course, with any change management, that process of training and onboarding will be important. We want to make sure that teams are particularly well trained on what they can and can't expect an agent to go do, and of course how to use them ethically and responsibly.
Thanks, Jamil. I mean, you've been talking a bit about cultural change, and I'm sure that change can be it can be uncomfortable for people or for companies. I mean, what are you seeing as far as where the cultural change is driving? Is it driving from from the ground up? Is it coming from leadership down? Are you seeing it going in both directions? How does this usually happen? In your experience?
Yeah, totally. I definitely see it in both directions. So the most successful companies and teams I've been involved with, they often are have, like I said, they have those beachhead teams, those teams that are like the first adopters and really want to go out there and get it. And usually you just look for them and you see how they're successful. Like you can do like hack days or those sorts of types of experiences. And what I found is that when you shine a light on those teams, they get more motivated, so they're more and more willing to go and try, experiment, and take some risks. And then they're a lot more willing to share, and a lot more teams are willing to go listen at that point. And then what we found is that it's helpful to pair that once you have that momentum going and you know that there are a couple of things that can be done to save time, to then start setting some goals as a team. And I found that teams that say, hey, look, like we know that we're spending, here's a repetitive process. We're very confident that we can go in and make it simpler so we can spend time elsewhere. Let's just go set maybe a quarter goal to save a certain percentage of time, building on the success that we know one of our sub teams had, right? And then as they do that, it kind of wakes everyone up to say, okay, look, I got to at least try this. And it's okay. Like I think it's better if the goals are meant to be a little stretchy and fun. Like, hey, like if you achieve this goal, it's like you get extra rewards. You're not like a stick. So that way folks are not actively pushing against or finding reasons for it to fail. I think that when we embrace it as like hey, like this is a big thing that our team can achieve together and we'll celebrate it if we're successful. That I think also just gets the right mindset going and gets people willing to try a bit more and experiment with things.
So it does take a bit of open-mindedness. Do you think teams that these beachhead teams, are they just interested in working with a new technology? Do you think some of them are motivated by trying to grow the company that they're at? Is it a little of both? Just curiosity and growth-mindedness?
Yeah. I'd say in my personal experience, I found two things to be most common. I think the first is that there are people who are just naturally curious, right? They hear about things and they're just naturally inclined to try things out. They're the early adopters and they'll be the ones who bring the latest tool to work for the first time or buy that personal license just to try it out and then trying to encourage their manager to buy more. So that's first, and that's a really helpful cohort to really motivate and support. The other are folks who are just tired of spending time on just mundane drudgery. Nobody really goes home from work and says, oh man, I was so thrilled I got to review 20 expense reports today and I found 4 bugs, right? Like that's like the stuff that I have to do as a manager, but it's not really the thing that at the end of the day I'm like celebrating or happy with. And I really wish I could just make that easier. And so when people, we find that when people are like really frustrated by these sorts of tasks, they're very receptive to say, oh, there's a tool that can help with that. Like I'm willing to spend 5 minutes to see if it'll work for me. And that what we find that we can kind of match, that pain relief opportunity, with someone who, can help or with an agent that can help. We find that like, their eyes just open wide and they're like, oh my God. A good example of this is people who write release notes. I was talking to an analyst the other day, and we had an example agent of, something that would take a look at issues in Jira that were recently closed and help draft release notes. And this is a task that every product manager at a software company would probably have to do at some point. And it's tedious, right? It's important. You have to communicate what you've done, but you have to literally go into all the issues and say, okay, what was this issue again? How do I summarize it? Then how do I put it into a format? And then I might have to go and replicate that a dozen times. I have to go translate it into a few different languages. And so like, it's just important, but tedious. And we said, okay, let's go and create the agent that helps you go and analyze those issues and create a summary for you to get you started. We did that, already happy. And then we actually said, hey, why don't we go and actually plug this into an automation so that whenever people are, like say once a week, as soon as the week is over, it automatically runs for you. And you actually does the first pass for you, does the first layer of translation, and then just creates all the content for you in a folder so you can review it later. And then they're like, oh my God, I don't have to think about it anymore. I just see the output as somebody did it for me. And you're like, yes. And then, they're sold, right? Immediately, because you just took so many manual steps that were not the thing that they're paid to do, right? Off their hands. And they could focus on the thing that actually does matter, which is it communicating what it needs to communicate, right? And how do I go in and do that extra touch to make sure that it's as effective as possible versus like copying and pasting and, like manually translating and putting it into tables, right? Those are all just extra steps that an agent could take off their hands.
That's amazing. You had me at pain relief opportunity. Just to shift a little bit, I mean, with AI evolving so rapidly, how do you make sure organizations are keeping responsible AI practices at top of mind at all times?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And especially in a time where things are changing, I think this responsible use is top of mind for everyone. And I think that, it comes down to a couple of things. One is, for companies like us, as people who supply these tools, we follow responsible AI guidelines. And I think it's important that anyone who's considering purchase, look at the responsible use guidelines that those companies follow. So for example, for us, we're very clear that we don't use our enterprise customers' data for training, right? And that's a commitment we make, and it's very clear. We also give a lot of controls so that people know that, hey, what we're going to do with their data, what we have access to, what the AI can and can't do with it, and that they can decide what they want to opt into or opt out of, right? We're very transparent about that. And it's important that any vendor you choose to provide the tools to you are willing to provide those controls and those assurances with you about how your data is used. We also think it's important for every organization that's using these tools to build their own guidelines and really look ethically at what can and can't be done with AI. It'd be, for example, there might be certain things that are easy to automate, but at a certain point you go too far. It would not be appropriate, for example, in my mind, for AI to be used to evaluate someone's performance, in a sort of complete way, and nothing is stopping a manager from doing that technically. Like we just the manager could decide to go do that, but the ethical guidelines that we have in place. And that I would hope most companies have in place would say, hey, that's crossing the line. Like, you shouldn't go do that. So we think that every organization needs to go and actually have that sort of discussion within themselves about what lines are going to draw and clearly articulate them and train their employees and their managers on how to go use it. It's also important to message as part of studying those guidelines that AI is not perfect, right? We know a lot about its strengths, but you have to keep its weaknesses in mind. For example, AIs are not deep thinkers. It's at the end of the day, it's a prediction model. So it's not going to do profound thinking or complex problem solving in ways that replace a human, and you can't go and expect it to go do that. The actions it performs, great when they're simple and straightforward. They're not going to be the same when you expect more complicated things. And of course, the misinformation, right? Like it's predicting based on available knowledge. You do have to check output, and especially when it's an important process and you're using AI to help simplify an important or critical process, you have to have some checks and balances in there. So I think those are the kinds of things that we really encourage every organization to incorporate into responsible use guidelines internally, and then of course make sure that you're working with vendors that have thought about the same things.
That's great. Jamil, just a lightning round, any parting words for organizations that are thinking about integrating AI agents into their own workflow?
Yeah, I just say, look, I think we all believe together that AI is changing the fabric of teamwork. And whether you're that software team, a marketing team, a customer support organization, we enter this world. We're entering this universe now where we expect that AI will be a partner to all of our jobs and help us remove that. So I think the sooner everyone is able to go and think in that way as AI as your partner, then I think we'll be set up to actually go and think through, okay, what does the constructive transformation look like, and how do I go in and manage my organization through that change? And we think that a success in the next couple of years is really, hey, look, our many of our customers and all of you out there, saying, hey, yeah, AI has taken a lot of the work off my plate. we're saving so much more time. And now that my teams are focused much more on meaningful work, those creative capabilities, the strategy discussions, the brainstorming capabilities, right? Those are all things that humans can uniquely do that AI will never replace. And we want to see people spending much more time on that. And I think that if all of us were running organizations out there, set goals around that and track our progress towards, that reality becoming true, then I think we'll be in a great place the next year or two.
That's great. That's a great note to end on. I'm sure we could keep this conversation going, but we are out of time today, Jamil. But thank you so much for your time and for your insights on AI agents and on the future of teamwork.
Yes, thank you for having me, and I'm looking forward to learning about all the folks out there and how they're transforming their teams with AI over the next year or two.